What is going on out there, everybody? And thanks again for joining us here on Expanded Perspectives with me, Cam Hale. And of course, as always, man, what did I tell you? All the peas to my carrots, the meat to my potatoes. Mr. Kyle Filio-Filson.
How's it going, everybody? Yep, I'm here in Skeleton Studios, ready to do today's show. I'm hyped up because the Stanley Cup playoffs is happening. Baseball is happening. The NBA playoffs
cap on.
is happening. Like, everything is happening. The kids are back in school. Finally, some peace and quiet around my house. Yeah, man. It's a lot easier. I liked having them home because, like we talk about so much, that time goes by fast. So it was nice to have them home. But enough is enough. It's like when your in-laws come over. It's good to see them. But after a couple days, you're like, all right, folks.
You got your own house.
Yeah. Go on. Be gone.
Get on now. Go on.
I'm glad that they're back. They seem to be glad to see their friends and just a little bit of normalcy, you know?
Yeah.
I am concerned on it spreading, though, because like every time they open up the restrictions, now that all the kids are going back to school, well, not all, okay. Here where we currently live, they give you the option. You can stay home or you can go to school. From what I've learned so far, about 75% of the kids have elected to go back to school.
I got you.
25% are staying home. But what I'm scared of is that because everybody's going back to school, of course, coronavirus is going to spread. This is what's going to happen, right? And I'm afraid that it's going to spread. They're going to freak out and they're going to send them all home again.
Yeah.
Because at some point, we're going to have to let the virus run its course. I mean, that's the way it works.
Yeah.
You know, back in the day, they would have chicken pox parties and stuff. They were trying to get everybody to get it. And no matter how long we wait, when they release the restrictions again, cases are going to go up again.
It's the way it works. Just that's how you get down. We just got to get through it. We'll get through it.
Yeah, I hope that doesn't happen. But yeah, man, everybody's going back to school. Everything's starting to get back into its natural order of things. It's a little quieter around.
It's cooling off.
Manor.
It's cooling off.
To cool off. So I'm excited. Fall is my favorite time of year anyways. I know it's still summer, but fall will be here pretty soon.
I got something I want to share with you.
Sure.
And this goes back into how we're always talking about people discovering things and finding things that they thought, were long since missing. And every time these come back, we always talk about this. So you always think of the thylacine. Every damn time I think of the thylacine. Well, my daughter found this link for me. And we were sitting in the living room together, and she was on her phone, and she's like, Dad, did you see this? And I'm like, no. And in fact, her birthday's coming up. So be next week. So she said, I'm going to send this to you. So she airdrops it over there to me. This comes from Duke Today. So it's Duke Today's website. And it was published on the 17th of August. And this is really, really interesting, Philly. It says lost species of African mammal rediscovered by Duke researcher.
What kind of species is this?
It is like a little tiny, let's see, what's it called? The Somali singus. It's the Somali elephant shrew.
Oh, so it's like a little tiny rodent.
Let me show you the picture. Check him out.
Yeah, that looks like
little long-nosed sucker.
It looks like another type of rodent I've seen. I don't know the name.
So listen to this. I'm going to read you this article written by the Duke staff. It says the Somali singi, also called the Somali elephant shrew, is a mouse-sized African mammal with a long, flexible nose that it waggles to and fro. In fact, it's a closer relative of other trunk-nosed creatures like aardvarks, elephants, and manatees. It says, now like this, no scientist had seen this particular species of singi from the Horn of Africa since the early 1970s. Only 36 historical specimens existed in museums that made the singi among the top 25 most wanted in the Global Wildlife Conservation's Search for Lost Species initiative.
Wow.
So I'm going to tell y'all can go look this up, read about any of this stuff. It's unbelievable. But it says that early last year, Duke Lemur Center researcher Stephen Heritage and a small team from other zoologists, including Galen Rathburn from the California Academy of Sciences and Hussein Rala from Association of Jimboto Nature,
yeah, that's right,
set out to see if the Somali singe was still around and maybe hanging out somewhere else in Eastern Africa other than Somalia. More than 1,200 live traps later, they had found 8 Somali singes and a whole bunch of mice and gerbils. With some modeling of its own distribution and potential habitats, they also concluded that the Somali singe is a lot more common than people had thought, with a much larger range that includes hot, dry, and rocky parts of Somalia.
Right.
So like I said, and they even say that they believe that there's a bunch hiding out. They believe in Ethiopia as they get down there. They're looking through their DNA, this whole thing. So if y'all are interested in this, but the reason I brought it up is just like that. From the 1970s, they hadn't seen them. Now look, it's not an 8-foot tall man ape. I get that, but it's still something that we thought was completely gone. And one guy was like, man, I'm not sure that it is. And then they go and find it. And that's why you and I always bring up, and I still feel this way, that the thylacine is out there.
I think so. You're right, though. Like it's much harder to find something large than it is something small. But you're 100% right. Mm-hmm. There are all kinds of new species constantly being found, and it's just not reported in the news because everybody's always worried about what Donald Trump's doing, what the Kardashians are doing. It's not. I mean, how many new species do you think were found in 2019?
NHL playoffs.
2019, how many new species do you think were discovered?
Oh, Lord. Of just everything across the board?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
2019.
I bet there's a lot more than we thought.
71. They say new species were found and discovered just in 2019.
I was going to guess like probably 25, but 71 new species.
71 new species on 5 continents and 3 oceans, including geckos, goblin spiders, flowering plants, and Mediterranean ants. This is according to the California Academy of Sciences.
Isn't that wild?
Just in 2020. As of July 1st of 2020, there's been 17 new spider species discovered, 23 insects, mostly bristly millipedes, and 1 monitor lizard. That's just so far this year. 17 new species of spiders.
Does it say, it may not, probably doesn't say in that article exactly where the spiders come. I just wonder if they're finding more and more and more as they keep exploring the Amazon.
Yes, that's exactly
the
right.
Congo as they're getting. And so it's one of those things. What else are you going to turn over and find?
You're 100% right. These new species were discovered in the Amazon, in India, and in the Pacific Islands.
There you go.
So places that's not largely inhabited
by
humans. And how many of the locals are there? They're aware of these things. They just never think about it.
Yeah.
Like you would never think to be like, oh man, I need to show you an armadillo.
You're never going to believe this spider. Like I've seen all these spiders. I've never seen that one. My thing is this, how they're tightening that circle, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're slowly tightening that circle in these areas that till either the animals that we all hope they find will either be dead or they will find remains or find evidence of the animals being there.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
at least I hope so.
I do too. Check this out. This comes from one of our listeners, a guy named Mark Freeborn. He said, I was born in 1978 in Bournemouth, England. I will do these stories chronologically. As I stated in my initial email, I do not believe in ghosts, but at the age of around 7 years old, I had a friend stay over at my house. We had bunk beds. I was on the bottom. My friend was on the top. I woke and saw a green, misty ball, circular, but no defining edges, slightly transparent in front of my wardrobe. I woke my friend, and they saw it for a short while as well. For some reason, we were not scared and never told anyone, though I did recently ask said friend about it, and they do have a vague recollection of it. Then we moved, I guess. I was about 12 years old, and my mother bought me one of those old radio alarm clocks that have the red numbers. It was placed on top of my old-style television, on a chest of drawers, and I went to sleep. I don't remember what time I woke up, but I stirred and looked in the direction of the TV and clock, and there was a white mist that resembled a woman, head to feet in all white. I immediately went under my blanket, covered my head, frozen in fear. I'm not sure for how long, but I eventually fell back asleep. Now, I mentioned the alarm clock as it was a radio alarm clock, the type that had the little black wire for an antenna and was all looped with a cord tie or zip tie or whatever type thing holding it together. When I put it on the TV, I had no interest on the radio function, mind you. I had an old cabinet stereo, the ones with the glass doors on front, LOL, showing my age. But the next morning when I went to the TV and clock, the black wire was unraveled. Now, I know that I didn't do it. I asked my mother, and she also said that she didn't do it. Still bothers me now, and I'm 42. I don't believe in ghosts. Now, this next story happened when I was about 13, and me and my friends were out in the common, not sure what you call it in America. We spotted a few lights in the sky after looking I could tell they were very close to us. There was one bright white light, no flashes of other colors, etc., and the other object was easy to tell was a helicopter. This helicopter flew right up to the other light and then backed away. I have no idea what it was, but from a very young age, I had a real interest in airplanes and stuff, and I knew straight away this was against all flight regulations. Now, this last one happened in 2011 during the winter. Now, by this point, I was a smoker, and I liked to smoke outdoors. I was working nights at this point, but it was my night off, so I was out at night smoking. I'd say it was around 3 a.m., and I was outside just having a smoke when I felt something above me. I looked up, and it was a dark mass very slowly going over my head. I could tell it was low, as the way it blocked the stars, and then they would reappear. I want to say it was triangular, but to be honest, I couldn't tell. The next one really freaked me out, as I had heard of the phenomenon by then. This happened in around 2017, about 12 p.m. Once again, I was outside having a smoke, and I saw 3 very bright lights in the lower sky not moving. And I've always been a lover of the night sky, so I know my Venus from Uranus. They were just as bright as Venus, if not brighter. I suffered the same fate as many. I have thought about having my camera, but I was just transfixed. I did a parallax check by walking up and down a bit, and these lights were closer than stars or the moon. Then they, one by one, slowly started dimming and then disappeared. Thanks, Mark. So, very interesting story. He's had a couple odd sightings throughout his life, whether it's spectral mist, ghost, or UFOs. But the last story reminded me of a story of 2 friends of ours that you just told me.
Yep.
The day before. We're outside. It was during the daytime. They saw something strange in the sky, some kind of orb, red, I believe. And they kind of faded away and just disappeared. They were there for a few minutes and then they weren't. What was it?
Yeah.
I don't know. And now with the government admitting that there's these off-world vehicles,
Makes you wonder, right?
it makes me wonder if this stuff isn't happening all of the time.
Yeah.
How much time in your everyday, when you're working, taking kids to practice, going to the grocery store, whatever, are you actually looking up and staring at the sky? Very little.
Very little. Yeah. Very little.
Right?
Yeah. Okay. I'll tell them the story. So here's what happened. I'm at the jiu-jitsu gym, right? I'm at class, getting ready to, class is about to start, hanging out there, and Monty and Shandon, the couple that own them, that own the gym, both black belts that I've known forever and ever and ever. And in fact, I actually married them. I did their wedding and known Monty for over 20 years. That son of a gun. So his wife, Shannon's the one that she's like, hey, I got to tell you something. Come here. And I'm like, what? That's what she explained is exactly what you're talking about. They saw 2 orbs and they were going home this past weekend and said they noticed it. And I don't remember if she said they stopped and pulled over because they were out in the country. They noticed it in the sky and it looked like 2 halogen lights up in the sky side by side. And she said that when they both went to looking at it, they only watched it for a few seconds. It wasn't moving. It wasn't anything. And it was like when they both took notice, it turned off.
Yeah.
And then there was nothing else up there. And then they drove and kept looking and were like, look, there's nothing else up there. So, yeah, I have no idea what that could be. But again, in your story that was sent in, again with the smoking. It's always with the smoking. It's always, and that may be just a thing that smokers do is you just, out there smoking and looking around and that whole deal. But it's always with the smoking. So how many, you know what? If you were a cigarette company, wouldn't the ad be like with UFOs in the sky with you smoke? I mean, that's the angle that I would play. You want to see cool things? Smoke our cigarettes and look up, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole smoking thing is bizarre. I mean, look, those are legal, but then other things aren't. I mean, it's ridiculous,
crazy.
Right?
I have a story here from you that our buddy Mike Mays at the Hicks's Cryptid Hunter posted this up. And it's also been sent to me by no less than probably 30 of y'all listening. So thank you very, very much. But here is it. It's from NBC4i.com. And it says, Athens County Sheriff's Office investigates a call involving, in quotations, creature. Yeah. So this is what it comes across here saying. It says that an Athens County Sheriff's Office responded to a call at suspicious activity at a state park. All right?
Mm-hmm.
So can you imagine, first of all, getting that like, oh, You got to get this call to run to the state park for a mysterious creature. So the first thing you're probably thinking, at least if it was me, would be like a mountain lion maybe, or a coyote, somebody that was there in the state park and was just surprised, didn't know what it was. So it goes on to say that with Ohio Department of Natural Resources officers unavailable, the sheriff's deputies responded to the call. According to a release from the office, the person who made the call to police said that they saw a person across a lake shine a red light in their direction. A short time later, the caller told police that they saw a bipedal creature around 3 or 4 foot tall walking near them and looking in their direction. The caller stated that they were uncertain at what they saw, but did not believe it to be a person. The sheriff's office patrolled the area, but didn't observe any suspicious activity or creatures at the time. Now, this sounds like a call that could have easily been part of mistaken identity with kids, right?
Yes.
I don't know how far it was, and they're saying 3 or 4 foot tall, so I'm assuming if you can judge that range, that you would be able to tell if it was a kid or not a kid, right?
Yes.
So take that story, folks. I jump over to Phantoms and Monsters, and Lon just so happened to have this up. Now, this is a 4-foot hairless humanoid encounter in Washington County, Wisconsin. And he had found this, I guess, or somebody had sent it to him from a Facebook group that says this. Back in 2014, at the urging of friends, I am reaching out to you about an encounter my teen daughter and I had at about 9:40 p.m. on September 17th. This will be 2014. We're traveling near Highway K and 167 near Holly Hill Basilica. I can only say that the creature was maybe 4 foot tall, hairless, gray-brownish, and running on its hind legs. It seemed to brace for impact as my car barely missed it. And then they ended up drawing a picture, and it looks like a tiny rake, the way that thing is drawn, but like a rake that's standing.
Yeah.
There's another member of the group responds. The countryside surrounding Holly Hill has more than its fair share of anomalous activity. In 2006, a large bear-like animal with canine characteristics, dogman maybe, dragged a dead deer from the back of a county contractor's pickup truck. The authorities recorded the encounter as a Yeti sighting and started a minor media frenzy, attracting Bigfoot hunters from as far away as California. Following the Bigfoot clamor, numerous eyewitnesses came forward with sightings of various strange animals ranging in description from the infamous Bigfoot to the odd bear-wolf hybrid. Also nearby is Hog's Back Road, an area that local teenagers claim is haunted by an even stranger cryptid, the Goat Man. Goat Man is exactly what he sounds like, a strange humanoid with Capran characteristics. To my eye, this creature, while almost assuredly not a human-goat hybrid, could put someone in the mind of the legendary creature, particularly with those very unsettling legs, which seem to have backwards bending knees. And goes on that says stories about goat men have been told around Washington County campfires and in parked cars since about the late 1960s. While the creature seems to be mostly urban legend, creatures with a blend of human and goat attributes have been reported sporadically across the United States, with the oldest I'm aware of occurring in the 1830s, Minnesota. And then it goes on to talk about its elbow was set low on the arm, legs seemed to be bent backwards at the knee like a dog's, very defined muscles, thighs especially. And this goes in, I guess this person had talked about the one that almost hit it, said, instantly I knew this was something incredible. We were shocked and confused trying to figure out what the heck we had just witnessed. We don't live far from that rural area, so we're pretty much freaked out to venture outside when it's dark. It's something we'll never forget. It was a monumental moment, and the vision of this thing is etched into our lives. I really want to know what that was. It was tangible, not our imagination. I wished I'd seen the face, but it braced itself and tucked its head down. I wish I would have hit it, not to cause harm, but just so people won't think I'm crazy.
Right, yeah.
Those who've seen the drawing so far remarked that it looks extraterrestrial to them, likely because of the large head that resembles the classic gray alien description. But I've pondered the drawing all weekend, and the only rational explanation I can think of isn't rational at all. It looks vaguely like a tailless kangaroo or wallaby. But just how did one of those make its way to southeastern Wisconsin? One can't solve a mystery by introducing a second equally puzzling mystery. MR, I can't agree more.
Right.
So again, and of course, I don't think it looks like a wallaby at all on this one. It
Not
still
the
looks
drawing.
like no, not the drawing. The drawing looks like a rake. But you want to look at my drawings?
My name is Simon.
That's right.
And I like to do drawings. Yeah, I remember that.
Right. So again, they're seeing this. There's too much. So what did the lady see in Athens over there? Maybe it was a little goat man. Maybe it was a little, who knows? But I like how we're getting more and more and more of these where it seems like they're smaller versions of hominid, which would make you believe that they are evolving so they can hide easier.
Yeah, right?
That's the reason we're not seeing the large big feet as much. They're becoming small big feet.
All right, guys, let's take a break. And when we get back from the break, I'm going to be talking about people with past lives. That's right, reincarnation, folks. Stay tuned. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives. Long time ago, when we first started the podcast, just over 7 years ago, we had on a very special guest. His name was Dr. Jim B. Tucker. Now, Dr. Tucker is a Bonner Lowry Professor of Psychiatry and Neurobehavioral Sciences at the University of Virginia. He is director of the UVA Division of Perceptual Studies, where he is continuing the work of his mentor, a Dr. Ian Stevenson, with children who report memories of previous lives. He has written at least 2 books on the subject, Life Before Life and Return to Life. I read both of his books before we ever had a podcast and was instantly intrigued by his research. When I emailed him about appearing on Expanded Perspectives, I couldn't believe he agreed. I remember being so excited. After speaking with him and reading his books, I was left scratching my head. I couldn't help not thinking about it for days and weeks to follow after our interview. Is reincarnation real? 33% of Americans, including 29%, which are Christians, think it is. And some 10% of them report being able to recall their own past lives. The Dr. Oz show has hosted Dr. Tucker, as well as Dr. Eben Alexander, another medical doctor who believes in reincarnation. And there are several reality TV series on the topic of reincarnation that have aired in the recent years, including Life, Death, and Reincarnation, which is extraordinary case studies of people who have recollect past lives. There was The Ghost Inside My Child, which was a show about children with past life memories, and Who Was I? My Past Lives. A hypnotherapist guides people through life regressions that lead toward astonishing revelations. Part of reincarnation's appeal has to do with its hopeful underlying promise that we can do better, perhaps, in our next lives. With reincarnation, there is always another opportunity. Yet despite the popular interest, few scientists give reincarnation much credence. They regard it as a field filled with charlatans, scam artists, and tall tales of having once been royalty. For more than 45 years, a team at the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia has been collecting stories of people who can recall their past lives. And if the professors determine that there is some merit to these memories, their findings will call into question the idea that our humanity ends with our death. Dr. Tucker was a child psychiatrist with a private practice when he heard about the reincarnation research being conducted by Ian Stevenson, who is also the founder and director of the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia. He was intrigued at the time and began working with the division in 1996. Well, 6 years later, Dr. Stevenson retired, and Dr. Tucker took over as the leader of the division's past life research. Now together, the UVA team has gathered more than 2,500 documented cases of children from all over the world who have detailed memories of their former lives, including that of a California toddler with a surprisingly good golf swing who said he had once been the legendary athlete Bobby Jones. A Midwestern 5-year-old who shared some of the same memories and physical traits, blindness in his left eye, a mark on his neck, and a limp. I'll be talking about this story coming up. Children in the UVA collection typically began talking about their previous lives, they claim, when they are 2 or 3 years old, and usually stop by the time they're 6 or 7. Dr. Tucker says this is around the same time that we lose our memories of early childhood. Now, when Dr. Tucker first learned about a subject, he checks for fraud or deliberate or unconscious claims by asking 2 questions. Do the parents seem credible? And could the child have accidentally picked up the memories through television, the internet, something like that, or just overheard conversations of other family members, or by some other ordinary means? If he can't rule out fraud, he and his team will interview the child, and his or her family will get a detailed account about a previous life. Then the researchers try to find a deceased person whose life matches those memories. This last part is essential because otherwise the child's story would just be a wild fantasy. Close to 3/4 of the cases investigated by this team, he claims, are solved, meaning that a person from a past matches the child's memories and is identified. In addition, nearly 20% of the kids in the UVA cases have naturally occurring marks or impairments that match scars and injuries of a past person. Now, to me, those are the most intriguing. The ones where kids actually remember like how they were murdered, and they have birthmarks or scars that coincide with their story. And then as the memory fades, so too does the birthmark and scar. I find that incredible.
What this research involves, this phenomenon, is very young children, usually around the age of 2 or 3, who start saying that they remember a previous life. These children are found in all over the world. They're easiest to find in cultures with a belief in reincarnation, but we're finding more and more American cases as well. And some of them talk about being deceased family members, but others describe being strangers in other locations, and if they give enough details, then people have often gone to those locations and found that in fact someone had died whose life matches the details that the child gave. The cases vary. There are some cases that are quite weak where the child talks about a previous life but doesn't give enough details where a match has been located. And of course those aren't really the interesting ones. I mean, there are also some very strong cases where the child comes out with very specific details that would basically only match for one person that had lived. Strong cases can involve different aspects. Certainly for a child to make statements about a stranger who lived in another location some distance away is stronger than a child who's describing a family member or someone in the same village. And we've got lots of cases of both types, of both strangers versus same family cases or people in the same village. Obviously, the more verified statements, the stronger a case it is. Particularly if we've got written records, that makes it even stronger. Then you've got the birthmark and birth defect cases where you can get some incredible matches where both an entrance wound and an exit wound that matches where the previous person was shot and killed. That can certainly make for a very strong case. And then you've got the sort of associated features like the emotional longing or some of the behaviors like phobias related to the mode of death of the previous person. In cases where the previous person died violently, over 35% of the children show a phobia related to that mode of death. You get children who in their play will repeatedly act out something from the previous life, usually the previous occupation. And some of those can be the children can be very driven to do that repeatedly. So those sorts of associated features, when you see them along with a lot of specific statements, really make cases quite strong. In the strongest cases, the children have given a lot of very specific details, including a lot of names. There's one case in Lebanon that Ian Stevenson investigated where the child came out with 25 names of people from their previous life, and not just names, but their relationship to the previous person. And there are a number of others with similar type of specificity, although that girl holds the record for names. But for instance, there's a little girl in Sri Lanka, Purnima, who talked about the life of an incense maker who'd been hit by a truck and killed, and she actually named the brands of incense that she said she was selling at the time. Those were brands that were not available locally, but eventually the family was able to track down this person who lived in the area where Purnima said he had lived, and he was killed on his bike selling incense, and the incense he was selling was the brands that she had named.
Let's get into some of these cases. Abby Swanson was a young girl who lived in Ohio. She was 4 years old when she began talking to her mother one night after having her bath. She said, "Mommy, I used to give you baths when you were a baby." And our mother, of course, replied, "Oh, really?" "Uh-huh. You cried a lot." That's what she said. And her mom asked her, "I did?" "Yup." That's what Abby said. "I was your grandma." And, of course, the mother, interested, says, "And what was your name?" She remembered her hair standing up on end, she claims, as Abby considered the question, tapping her mouth with her fingers. The young child was thinking. Lucy, I think? No, Ruthie. Ruthie was my name." Now, since this was Abby's great-grandmother's name, her mother tried to ask her more questions, but Abby did not say anything else. Abby's great-grandmother died in 1985, 9 years before Abby was ever born. She had 20 grandchildren, and unlike most of the others, Abby's mother lived nearby and was close to her while growing up. They had some conflict when Abby's mother was a teenager, but then got along well when she became an adult. Abby's mother would occasionally mention Abby's great-grandparents to her children, but never by name, and she had not talked about them for at least 6 months before that night. In addition, Abby's grandmother lived on the West Coast and could not have been a source of the information for Abby to learn about her great-grandmother. Later, her mother did check with Abby's grandmother to confirm that Abby's great-grandmother had in fact given her mother baths. Abby's grandmother also said that her mother cried a lot when she was given baths as a baby. Abby's mother is certain that Abby had never heard of her great-grandmother's name before. In fact, when she asked her a few days later what the name was, Abby didn't seem to remember. Whatever knowledge or memory was available to Abby that night was not available to her after that.
And there are a number of others where you're talking about very specific details that seemingly the child had no way of knowing. And I think enough details where coincidence really is not a reasonable explanation. So, you know, they would certainly suggest that in some cases at least, there are some very strong memories and very specific memories that seemingly have carried over from somebody who died. Well, I think the most likely normal explanation for the cases is that the children make a few statements about a previous life, particularly in cultures with a belief in reincarnation where many of our cases take place. The family gets excited about it, finds somebody who died previously who matches in a general way to what the child said. Then once the families meet and compare notes, they end up thinking that the child had a lot more specific details about the previous life than the child actually had. So That is a possibility in many of the cases. However, it's not a possibility in cases where there is a written record of the statements that the child made before anyone tried to solve the case. We've got over 30 of those now. It would not explain the birthmark and birth defect cases where the children are born with marks or defects that match wounds, usually fatal wounds, on the body of the previous person. It would also not explain why many of these children express a lot of real emotional longing for the previous family before anyone's even discovered if there is such a previous family. I mean, there's a real emotional component to this. In addition, a couple of studies have been done to look at this possibility that faulty memory by the families is producing these cases. In one, Ian Stevenson as well as Sibo Scouten compared cases that had a written record of the statements that the child made before anyone ever looked versus cases where there was not a written record made ahead of time. With the idea being that if the families were unintentionally making these cases a lot stronger than they actually are, then the ones without the written records would have more statements because the families were saying that the child had said these things. But what they actually found was the reverse, that the ones with the written records had more statements. Statements being ones that the child made about their previous life that turned out to be accurate for the person that was identified. And presumably that's because with the written records, people could remember exactly what the child had said because they could just look at it on the piece of paper, whereas without the written records, the families tended to forget over time some of the statements that the child had made. So that study would go against the argument that it's just faulty memory. The other study that bears on this is Ian Stevenson and Jürgen Keil did a study where Jürgen reinvestigated cases that Ian had studied 20 years before. And he actually started that study by accident when he studied a case and then discovered that Ian had studied it many years before. But then he realized there was value in it, so he continued to do it, and he collected 15 cases to look to see if over the years they had been built up in the family's minds and had become more impressive than they were when Ian was on the scene earlier. And again, what he found was they had not become stronger. Many of the cases had become weaker. And that's because, again, the families had forgotten a lot of the details that they had known earlier on. So both of those studies really argue against the faulty memory by families possibility as an explanation for the strongest of these cases. Other possibilities that need to be considered, one would simply be coincidence that we've already talked about a little bit, that the child's statements just happen to match somebody who's found. And again, if the child's statements are general, then that certainly needs to be considered. But with a number of these cases, with the incredibly specific statements, coincidence just seems as a preposterous explanation. Fraud certainly has to be considered. And I think anyone who reads Ian's case reports would agree that he's not committing fraud. I mean, he very carefully documents what has happened and also documents the weaknesses of the cases as well as the strengths. You have to consider whether the families are committing fraud. And in the vast majority of cases, there's just no reason to think they would because they don't gain anything from it whatsoever. And in addition, in a lot of the cases, there are a number of witnesses involved. So it would involve some grand conspiracy to accomplish nothing. And I mean, we know that this is a phenomenon that occurs, that the whole thing's not made out of, whole cloth. And I think if anyone spent time with these families, they might decide that the families were deluding themselves, but I think they would agree that these are just straightforward, honest people who are not intentionally committing a fraud.
Check out this one. A boy named Patrick Christensen was born by cesarean section in Michigan in 1991. When the nurses brought him to his mother, she immediately felt that he was connected somehow to her first son, who happened to have died of cancer at the age of 2 back in 1979, which was 12 years earlier. She soon noticed that Patrick displayed 3 defects that matched those of her older son had when he died. Her first son, whose name was Kevin, began a limp when he was 1.5 years old. One day, he fell and broke his left leg. This led to a medical workup that included a biopsy of a nodule on his scalp right above his right ear. Doctors diagnosed him with metastatic cancer. A bone scan showed many abnormal sites. His left eye was protruding and bruised due to a tumor. He received chemotherapy through a central line, or a large IV line, in the right side of his neck. Though the site on his neck where the chemotherapy agents were entering his body became flushed and slightly swollen several times, he had no major problems with the treatment and was eventually discharged to go home. He received outpatient treatment, but returned to the hospital 5 months later. At that point, he appeared to be blind in his left eye. He was admitted with a fever, treated with antibiotics, and discharged from the hospital once again. He died 2 days later, 3 weeks after his second birthday. Now, Kevin's parents had separated before his death, and his mother eventually remarried. She gave birth to a daughter and son before Patrick was born. At birth, he had a slanting birthmark with the appearance of a small cut on the right side of his neck, the same location of Kevin's central line. He had a nodule on his scalp right above his ear, just as Kevin's biopsy tumor had been, and opacity in his left eye, diagnosed as corneal leucoma, that caused him, like Kevin, to have very little vision in that eye. When he began walking, he limped, favoring his left leg. When Patrick was almost 4.5 years old, he began telling his mother things that she felt were related to the life of Kevin. He talked for some time about wanting to go back to their previous home and told his mother that he had left her there. He said that the home was orange and brown, which was correct. He asked his mother if she remembered him having surgery, and when she replied that he had not had any kind of surgery, he said that he did, and he pointed to the area right above his ear, where Kevin had his nodule biopsied. He also said that he did not remember the actual surgery because he was asleep when it was done. At another time, Patrick saw a picture of his brother Kevin, whose pictures were not normally displayed in the family's home, and said that the picture was of him. After Patrick began making these statements, his mother contacted a woman named Carol Bowman, who is an author and who's written 2 books about children who talk about previous lives. Her book was called Children's Past Lives and Return from Heaven. They talked on the phone a number of times, with Carol offering guidance on how to deal with the past life issues that seemed to be coming up. She eventually referred the case to Dr. Tucker and Dr. Stevenson, and that's when they visited Patrick's home. When they visited him, he was 5 years old at the time. Now, while they were there, they saw the photographed pictures of the birthmark on Patrick's neck, which was a 4mm dark slanting line on the lower part of the right side of his neck that looked like a healed cut. The nodule on his head was very hard to see, but was easy to feel. So they documented it, where the small mass was, they felt it, they checked out the opacity in Patrick's left eye, and obtained copies of the eye exams he had received. They watched him walk and definitely could see that he had a slight limp. Now, having no medical condition that would explain it. He said that they obtained Kevin's medical records and they documented the history described earlier, including the lesions that appeared to correspond to Patrick's subsequent birthmarks. Dr. Tucker took Patrick to the home that Kevin had shared with his mother. Patrick, unfortunately, did not have great enunciation and could be difficult to understand at times, but he did not make any statements that definitely indicated that he recognized the home. In summary, Patrick had 3 unusual lesions at birth that appeared to correspond to lesions that his half-brother Kevin had suffered. In addition, he limped when he began walking and also alluded to events in Kevin's life when talking to his mother. Over time, the birthmarks went away and Patrick stopped limping, and all memories of his brother Kevin faded into obscurity.
It's not something where you can put a firm statistic on it, but we can certainly say that it's extremely unlikely that this would simply be due to coincidence. I mean, I think you can say that for an individual case, and then you multiply that by hundreds, then I think we can dismiss that as a possibility. A lot of these cases include a strong emotional component where there are numerous witnesses who say that the child begged to be taken to the previous family for years, sometimes crying literally on a daily basis for years to be taken to where they said their real parents were. And I mean, it's completely illogical to think that families would have coached a child to do that and then so that a couple of years later they could then take them somewhere. I don't think, with very rare exception, I don't think there's any reason to think that fraud is a likely explanation for the vast majority of these cases. We study children because they're the ones who spontaneously talk about past life memories. Our work does not involve hypnotic regression, but instead just this phenomenon of very young children, usually starting around the age of 2 or 3, who spontaneously say that they remember a previous life. The children usually stop making these statements by the age of 6 or 7. So, it's a very small window there in which to try to learn as much as possible. And some of the children say that they still, or some of the adults, if you look back, say they still had some memories, they just stopped talking about it. But most of them clearly just forget. So studying adults would be rather pointless because they don't have any of the memories. But the advantage of this phenomenon is that the children being so young have not been able to search the internet and find out details or whatever. I mean, you can be pretty sure in a lot of cases they have not learned the information through normal means, but it's something that they seem to have picked up in some sort of paranormal way.
All right, check this one out. Kanai Kumiwalilong was born in central Thailand in 1967 with 2 birthmarks, one on the back of his head and one above his left eye. Now, when he was born, his family did not think that the birthmarks were particularly significant. But when he was 3 years old, he began talking about a previous life. He said that he had been a school teacher named Buakai and that he had been shot and killed while on the way to school. He gave the names of his parents, his wife, and 2 of his children from that life. And he persistently begged his grandmother, with whom he lived, to take him to his previous parents' home in a place called Khao Phra. Eventually, when he was still 3 years old, his grandmother did just that. She and Kanai took a bus to a town near Khao Phra, which was 15 miles from their home village. After the 2 of them got off the bus, Kanai led the way to a house where he said his parents lived. The house belonged to an elderly couple whose son, Buakai Lonak, had in fact been a teacher, who happened to be murdered 5 years before Kanai was born. Now, Kanai's grandmother, it turned out, had previously lived 3 miles away. Since she had a stall where she sold goods to many people in the surrounding area, she vaguely knew of Buakai and his wife. She had never been to their home and had no idea to whose home Kanai was leading her. Once there, Kanai identified Buakai's parents, who were there, with a number of other family members as his own. They were impressed, enough by his statements and his birthmarks to invite him to return a short time later. When he did, they tested him by asking him to pick out Buakai's belongings from others, and he was able to do that, no problem. He recognized one of Buakai's daughters and asked for the other one by name. Now, Buakai's family accepted that Kenai was in fact Buakai reborn, and he'd visited them a number of times afterwards. He insisted that Buakai's daughters call him father, and if they did not, he refused to talk to them. As for Buakai's wounds, no autopsy report was available, but Dr. Stevenson talked with a number of family members about his injuries, and they all said that he had 2 wounds on his head from being gunshot. His wife remembered that the doctor who examined Buakai's body said that the entrance wound was the one on the back of his head because it was much smaller than the wound on his forehead and would have been the exit wound. These matched Kenai's birthmarks, a smaller circular one on the back of his head and a larger, more irregular one on the front. They were both hairless and puckered. No one photographed them until Kenai was 11 and a half years old, so determining exactly where they were on his head at birth is difficult. In the photographs, the larger one is on the left, towards the top of his head in front, but witnesses said that it had been lower on his forehead when he was younger. In this case, a number of witnesses stated that a young child with birthmarks that matched the entrance and exit wounds on a deceased man had knowledge about that man's life, and that he seemingly could not have obtained this knowledge through normal means, and he was able to pass tests that the man's family constructed for him. And just like with young Patrick, over time the birthmarks faded. Eventually they were completely gone, and Kenai has little to no memory of his previous life. There's lots of other cases that are exactly like this one, and I'm probably going to get into some more of them on an Elite show coming up. And I know, like I said, years and years ago, we talked about this subject. We may even talked about that exact same story. But man, I just find these kind of stories fascinating. I mean, it's kind of hard to argue with some of this stuff. So in the end, is reincarnation a real thing? Do we come back perhaps to repeat our lives over and over again until we eventually get it right? Why do some people get a second chance and others don't? Do you even want a second chance in the first place? Would you like to come back? Would you like to come back perhaps a different person completely? Would you like to come back perhaps a different gender, a different race, from a different nation? In the end, we won't know until it's too late. Let's take a break, and we'll all come back after that. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives. Today's episode of Expanded Perspectives is brought to you by BetterHelp. Cam, during these trying times of this COVID lockdown, a lot of people are out of work, money's tight, and a lot of people are feeling down. Some people just don't have anybody to even talk to. That's why there's BetterHelp. Is there something interfering with your happiness or is preventing you from achieving your goals? BetterHelp will assist your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You can start communicating in under 48 hours. Now, it's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It is professional counseling done securely online. There's a broad range of expertise available, which may not be locally available in many areas. The service is available for clients worldwide. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your counselor. You'll get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions so you won't ever have to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room as with traditional therapy.
That's right, Philly. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches so they make it easy and free to change counselors if needed. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available. Now, BetterHelp wants you to start, of course, living a happier life today. So if you visit their website, you can read their testimonials that are posted daily that they're posted there. So if you go to BetterHelp, go to betterhelp.com/expanded. That's BetterHelp, HELP, and join the over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they're recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states here. And the special offer for all of you expanded listeners right now to get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp. That's better, HELP.com/expanded.
And we're back with Expanded Perspectives. Hope you like those stories. I know I did. Cam, when you were doing that story earlier about these shrinking hominids, it reminded me of an article I read a couple weeks ago. Are you familiar? Now, I know that you've done an episode, I don't remember if it was Elite or if it was regular, about the black shuck.
Yes.
And these other black dogs that have been seen in England. Are you familiar with the shape-shifting headless hound of Barnaby? Or of Barnby, my bad. This is pretty cool.
I think I remember, I at least have heard that Barnby, the headless hound of Barnby or something. I've heard that.
Yeah, check this out. It says in the Eastern Daily Press of January 17th, 1968, a guy named Albert Sharman told his story. Now, Albert said he was walking home one night and was coming up to the water bars, which I guess is a bar, I'm not sure, when he noticed a dog alongside him. Now, Mr. Sharman said he did not pay any special regard to the animal. He simply turned to it and tried to talk to it. He said he looked and he saw that it was no ordinary dog. It was big and black, but it had no head. He put his hand down, he said, to try to pet the animal, but it went clean through the dog.
Uh-oh.
There was nothing there, like it was translucent.
That is no bullshit, hands down, the goddamnest thing I ever saw.
I'm with him.
Right? He got the wind up, it says, and ran home to his family. He said he told them, I saw a dog on the road and I went to touch it, but it wasn't there. There was no bloody head on it.
I got to leave that button alone.
Right? He said that the story that Mr. Sharman reported to the paper had been corroborated by the postmistress at North Cove, a Miss Brenda Bartram, who said that she had seen the creature twice before, on one occasion with her sister, Dora Haran. Now, the post office that was down the street, Miss Bartram said, we went around the corner and suddenly saw a big black dog like a Labrador. I said to my sister, look, it's Boy Partridge. Let's take him home. He shouldn't be out on the road. I went to get a hold of him, and he shriveled up to the size of a cat.
What?
Yeah, like it shrunk. I have never been so frightened in my entire life. I was absolutely petrified. I fell down on the road to my knees and screamed. My sister ran up to the church steps and tried to tell somebody. She also said that the dog shrunk to the size of a cat before it vanished. Now, another guy, a guy named Michael Wigg, who's an engineer, said he was walking home with his bicycle after getting a puncture when at water bars. He saw something strange. He says, I was by the gamekeeper's cottage, and it was half light out when I glanced to one side and saw what looked like a big Labrador. It looked black. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see any movement. It was very eerie. I turned around to look at the dog, and it was gone. It was definitely a big black dog, but it made no noise, and I felt a cold shudder come over me at the time. I hurried home and told my family. There's another one. This is from a Mutford farm worker named Denny Collier, who said he was walking home from Lowestoft to Barnby when he saw a black dog with a chain around its neck. He says the dog brushed alongside of his legs. He bent down and heard the chain rattling as it was dragging along the road. He went to pet the dog, and it disappeared. Now, according to legend, that dog was killed on a nearby railroad track, and its head was either cut off or crushed by the train, and that it still haunts these roads. So it reminds me of the black shuck, and I wonder why, for whatever reason, when it comes to England, there's always like the black dog, the phantom black cats, which it turns out that those weren't really phantoms, that like a zoo actually released a bunch of them. Everything seems to be black, but this is like a ghost dog. So if humans can be ghosts, why can't animals? The guy, several stories, people tried to pet it. Their hand goes all the way through it. I don't know about the shrinking to the size of a cat.
That's awesome.
That's crazy.
That's awesome.
Anyways, that's a pretty cool story.
That is wild, but it is like the Hound of the Baskervilles, like all of that is. But it's like that. It's just supposed to be more ominous, I guess, is what the whole.
Do you think there was one original story which because it's popular in that area, like you're talking about, it's spread and people have created new legends, even though
Oh yeah,
they were inspired by the original. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that could happen. Yes, of course, that could be one of the answers. Yeah, I mean,
I think the same thing happens.
Denying it would be lying. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the same thing happens in all fields of cryptozoology, ufology. People hear a story about a dog man, so they create a story, or all of a sudden, what you hear a strange sound in the woods, which you previously would have thought was a guy in a gorilla costume. Now, because you're aware of this story, you're like, I think it was a dog man. Because when I was a kid, I never heard stories of dog men, ever.
No, the closest thing we ever thought about was, like we always laugh about werewolves, was werewolf movies, but nobody ever brought it up, which is odd. It's very odd that Bigfoot has been around this long and nobody thought about, like, I guess for me, I hate to even put this out there to let people think this way, but for what kind of adds a little validity to my thought on Dogman like that is, if it were going to be a lie, wouldn't somebody have come up with that lie a lot longer than it took till now?
Yeah, you mean it would have come up much earlier? Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
So.
Like if you were telling me, oh, I was Patterson Gimlin and there's Bigfoot, and I was really into Bigfoot, I'd be like, well, if I can see what this is doing, what if I found a werewolf or a cat man or something? What if I created something like that? I would think, especially when all this started, that they would have jumped on. I mean, that was like in the heyday of sci-fi, right? So you would think that if you're going to make it up, you would be like, oh, God, I see what he's doing. I mean, look at Dr. Pepper and Coca-Cola and Pepsi. I mean, you look at it's the same thing. Like, well, I've got Catman. Well, I got Dogman. But it took a while before that actually started coming out. So now we've done it where, you go way, way back in history.
Yeah.
And there's written accounts of these things. But
some of the accounts of Bigfoot sightings,
yes,
the face is described as dog-like.
Dog-like, exactly. So it's one of those, I don't know. It's I don't want to believe any of it. I'll just, like you and I always laugh. One day I'm like, yeah, I could see that. Next day I'm like, it's impossible. There's no way this could happen. So I don't know. It's just, but the shrinking headless, dude, that's a crazy story.
Dog of Barnby?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, whenever I see or read these accounts of dog men and stuff, I think it's something demonic. And it's materializing in something that it thinks would scare you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
It's feeding off your energy.
It does seem like it's more like it's
like
more
form.
It's like an energy hunter. Yeah, like it's coming for your soul. It's not coming for what covers your soul. It's coming for your soul.
Well, just like, in the famous movie Ghostbusters, remember when Zool is there? It's like, oh, we're gonna have a battle.
Yeah,
I'm gonna be your destructor. Choose what form I take.
Yeah.
And he accidentally thinks of the Stay Puffed Marshmallow Man, but it was willing to assume any form. So I think that these jinn or demons or whatever, they probably can sense what you're scared of and manifest itself like that.
Well, and
it's just a theory.
Yeah, and it's so odd because like the guys we had on had shot it and found blood trail, and it's everything about it is odd. Of course, everything about all these cryptid sightings are odd. So it's really nothing out of the normal, I guess.
Right. What do you got planned for the rest of your week?
Man, oh man, I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm going to get. Shooting my bow some more. I hope. And we're having my daughter's birthday party Sunday because her birthday is Monday and she has to go back to college on that day. So we're going to, do some stuff Sunday with her.
That sounds awesome. If you have any stories you'd like to share with me and Cam, please don't hesitate. Send those stories to expandedperspectives@yahoo.com. You can follow the show on all forms of social media. Don't forget about Elite, folks. If you like this show, you're missing out. There's a whole back catalog. I think there's like 230 episodes there. You can go to the website, expandedperspectives.com, click on the Elite tab, sign up. It's $5 a month. You get extra episodes every month, as well as access to that entire back catalog. That money not only gets you access to those episodes, but it helps me and Cam. It helps the show. It helps with production, helps in the purchase of new books and materials and stuff like that keeps the show going. It really helps out a lot. If it wasn't for the Elite members, we probably still wouldn't be doing this 7 years later.
Probably
also,
not.
We switched platforms. You've heard us mention it, and I know some people have experienced it. A bunch of people have emailed us about they're missing episodes, or it's been sporadic, or things didn't come out. We were having a problem with the RSS feed. We switched our platform over to Libsyn from FeedBurner or wherever we had it. And so I know in the process of doing that, our IT guy said that he had to restrict some of the episodes.
Yeah.
But don't fret. He said that in a couple weeks, he's going to go back and all the old episodes will reappear. So if you're tuning in and you're like, wait a minute, I looked last week, there was 300 episodes, and now there's only 12. What happened?
Yeah.
They're not being permanently removed. They're only going to be temporarily removed. They will be back because we want to keep out every episode we've ever done because we've done some really important interviews way back in the day.
Well, wait a minute. We think they're important.
Okay, yeah. To us, you're correct. But you know, like the whole the gray wolf.
Yeah.
You know, about Hitler escaping to Argentina. I mean, like now that's on Discovery Channel.
John Anthony West. And he's gone.
It's popular, you know. But we interviewed that guy long before that television series. Yeah. Anyways, there's a lot of cool interviews that are dropping off, and we don't like that. We want to have every episode, even I don't want you to listen to the first 10. I want them there for people to enjoy because, man, it's pretty brutal when you get up to the first episode. We didn't know what we were doing.
Still
we don't
not
know what we're
really
doing now. That's why we're having this whole problem.
That's right. That's 100% correct.
All right. Well, everybody keep your social distancing. Wash your hands. Wear your mask. Till next time, I'm Kyle Filson. He's Cam Hale.
Peace, y'all.